everybody? This is James Diboe on Discovering Season 3, and we got a special guest in. Been on before, and he's back on again. We're covering New York hip-hop. DJ Toucan, how you doing, my brother?
I'm good, good. Thanks for asking me to come back.
Well, we needed you back on because I felt last time, we had so much to talk about with hip-hop. Yeah. I mean, you can't do 1.5 hour podcast, can you? So we're dealing with New York hip-hop anyway now. Mm-hmm. All right, then. So when we're going from the beginning of New York, who is the first rapper or rappers of this, the first era of the beginning?
Right. So, I mean, if you're talking about the very beginning, you have to go back before really the rap sort of element kicked in. So you had a DJ who was originally from Jamaica called DJ Kool Herc.
Oh, no, the name, yeah.
So Kool Herc. So he was, as I say, originally from Jamaica, but he lived in the Bronx, and he was a DJ and had a sound system. I mean, if you go back and check the archives, you'll see a picture of his car, and you want to see the size of the speakers in his car. It's ridiculous. So, but anyway, he was doing these house parties. What was different, because at that time, disco was huge. Disco was the #1 music for just generally anyway, but also certainly in as far as black music is concerned. But Herc used to go for these like funk and soul and rare groove type of records in his parties. And then what he would do, he was onto the fact that during a certain point of the record, generally during the bridge or the break, the crowd would go crazy. So what he would do, he would concentrate on that. So he'd buy 2 copies of the same record. So when it got to a certain part of the record and the crowd would go crazy, he would then play the same break again. So normally it was like a drum, piece.
Yeah.
Not very much singing over it. So it'd be like a drum breakdown. But there was loads of records at the time that had these little breaks in them. So he would play the breaks back to back. And that's what people started really getting into. And they'd go to these parties waiting for the break to drop. Anyway, how it sort of happened was that then someone like Grandmaster Flash would also get onto this kind of way of DJing. And then what would happen is that there'd be a mic at the parties, so that someone would get on the mic then during the break. And then they'd be like, right, okay, so everyone put your hands in the air, say ho. And that was the introduction to the MC. And also, during that break, the dancers in the crowds would go crazy. And that's where breakdancing came. And that's why it's called breakdancing, because you'd start dancing during the break. And that's where B-boys and B-girls came into it. So, so as far as the origin goes, there's actually a date. It was the 11th of August, 1973, at a rec, like the rec room in Sedgwick Ave in the Bronx. That's being pinpointed as the actual birth date of hip-hop. Because you had Kool Herc there. You had, I'm sure Clark Kent was on the bill. And you can, if you again go in the archives, you'll see a little flyer from that actual date. So the DJ came first, and then the MC, which is the master of ceremonies, or the mic controller, but the master of ceremonies, he's the person who would jump on the mic. And then he'll just point out, so we got such and such in the corner over there, and then that's how the sort of MCing element came through.
Yeah.
And the earliest ones were people like Busy B. And obviously, the earliest ones to actually record are people like Curtis Blow. Obviously, Grandmaster Flash had the Furious Five, so you had Melly Mel, Scorpio, Cowboy, Kid Creole, and them kind of things. So they were the very early inceptions.
Yeah.
And then obviously, Sugar Hill Gang came out in '78. Rapper's Delight.
Yeah.
Which was really, that was more of a rap. I wouldn't say it was a hip-hop song, because it was obviously over chic. Good times. So, and there was a guy who was called DJ Hollywood, who basically used to do very similar to what Rapper's Delight done, as far as just throwing rap lyrics over a known popular beat. So that wasn't really hip hop.
Yeah.
It was one of the elements, which of course is rap. But hip hop really, as I say, it's pinpointed to that party.
Well, when we're dealing with DJs, funny enough you said that, because I remember a lot of hip hop artists had a DJ.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, I'm going to give you an example, DJ Polo and Cool G Rap.
Yeah.
Now, I know Cool G Rap, he he first came out and he's with the Juice Crew and that.
Yeah,
but he always had Polo. I'm not sure when he went round about them times. And then he dropped like 3 albums with Polo.
Yeah.
The first one was 1989, Road to Riches.
Big album.
1990, that was called Wanted Dead or Alive.
Yeah.
And then the third, Live and Let Die, in 1992. Yeah. Then he leaves Polo after that. But it seems like the DJ and the MC they went together.
Yeah,
then it just stopped that. Not stopped every single person, but it seems like you didn't need your DJ. Yeah. Is it about just cashing in getting the change yourself or something?
No, I think at one point, to have a because that's where hip hop came from. Hip hop came from having a DJ and an MC. So when you're talking about Cool G Rap and Polo from, the late 80s going into the 90s, certainly around the 80s, it's very hard to think of a rap group or a rap outfit or a rap act that didn't have your MC or MCs and your DJ. So everyone, Public Enemy had Terminator X, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince.
Yeah.
Obviously Jazzy Jeff's the DJ. Cool G Rap and Polo, Cash Money and Marvelous. You can go on and on and on. And always, not always, but quite often the DJ is mentioned. And if the DJ isn't mentioned as part of the group name, you will know who the DJ. I mean, if you throw me, if you say De La Soul, then Maceo's the DJ. So, Gangstar, Premier's the DJ.
Yeah.
And the DJ would quite often, not always exclusively, but quite often be the producer because he's the music guy.
Right, yeah.
Why it's not such a thing anymore is probably more just due to change and the emphasis, especially now in this modern culture where, there's very few groups anymore, never mind.
That's true.
DJ and an artist. Yeah. Because, when it comes to social media, it's very hard to push a group, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Social media is very singular-based, individual-based. So that's why you find that there's less and less groups. There used to always be duos, P-Rock and CL Smooth. You know what I mean? Redman and Method Man obviously formed a duo. You can go on and on where there's duos in hip-hop historically. But very often now it seems to be more individual artists. But I think that's just the way it goes now.
So what's your favourite era? I mean, I like all the eras from the 80s to the even late 70s, 80s, 90s. But 90s I feel that was the real golden era.
Yeah.
The 80s is the golden era, but I feel like the 95, I felt it peaked.
Yeah.
I don't think it's since 95, like it's...
you know what, I mean, for as someone who's a fan of hip-hop first, I can probably pick out, I can pick out artists and groups from most of the eras and say that as good as you had your Public Enemy, De La Souls going into late 80s, and then you had, obviously your Pete Rocks and Gangstars and stuff going into the 90s, and obviously Rakim, and then go to the 90s with your Nas and Mobb Deep and all them. But then going into the end of the 90s, you had MF Doom, you had Mos Def, you had Talib Kweli, you had, Jay Dilla. So, it
was still bang. It was still like, I mean, like I felt like it's. If we're dealing with the 80s now, this is probably the solidest era, the most purest, very pure. Then when you get to the early 90s, it seems it's still got that pureness, but it seems like the West Coast. Well, that was the late 80s. They were more, but some of the West Coast were decent at the time. It was like it was like this New York rivalry with the West Coast, and some good tunes on this side, some good tunes on this side. Yeah. Even though I'm a New York man.
Yeah. And don't forget, the West Coast wasn't just about gangster rap, and wasn't just about, sort of that kind of gangster rap kind of theme, because you had incredible, like Souls of Mischief, King T, Alcoholics, The Coop, who were like very conscious at the time. A lot of conscious MCs came out of the West Coast from LA and Compton and all them kind of places. So it's a bit of a thing where people think West Coast was just about gangster rap, and it's far from that. You know what I mean? There's so many incredible artists from the West Coast over the years, certainly from the early 90s right through to the late 90s. But for me personally, I'd say that era for me was certainly around 91 to, I'd say 1990 to 1995.
95, maybe pushing 96, 7, yeah.
That for me. That for me personally, but that's probably more down to the age I am, and so if and that's the time I was in my late teens, going into my 20s. So if you're in your late teens and 20s, 5 years later, you will probably find that era of music better for you, because
you know what I always like as well. Yeah, remember Rakim come back and he went missing for a bit in 1997. He dropped Guess Who's Back.
Yeah.
And I was listening to that whole album. Is it the 18th letter or there's the R?
I think it was the 18th letter. I think it was.
Okay.
You could be right with the R, actually.
Well, it was with that album in 97 now. And I'm listening to them commenting as he's doing the album, because he's doing a few interludes. And he's mentioning about how he had to bring hip-hop back.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, well, who are the ones? Because I felt like what it was with the 90s rappers, a load of them were good, but they started like flossing a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
A little bit, like even like how the shiny suit setter and stuff like that. But I remember Rakim talking on that, and that whole album was just pure, as if like this is a brand new guy.
Yeah.
And it's like that's just too amazing. That album.
He hooked up with didn't he hook up with Premier?
It was that's right.
Guess Who's Back?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is about that particular time, because a lot of people look at like Bad Boy as being the start, not only the start of the shiny suit era, as they called it, but also a lot of people took it as being a bad thing in hip hop, or something. Hip hop was losing stuff, and the arguments for that a lot. In some ways, I do agree with. Do you know what I mean? I mean, De La Soul, Stakes Is High, just sort of summed it up perfectly, where he was like, I'm sick of Versace glasses, I'm sick of people talking about blunts, I'm sick of, R&B such and such over BS tracks and stuff like that. And it was refreshing, because there was so much of it at one point, people were getting sick of it, this flossing kind of idea. But hip hop has always had people who flossed. If you look at the Paid in Full cover.
Oh yeah. Of course.
You know what I mean? You got the big Dookie gold rope chains. Big Daddy Kane didn't go anywhere without it, you know what I mean? But
that's right.
But obviously it became a thing, and people sort of it almost created a division in hip hop, where people were like, well, that's not real hip hop. What we believe in is real. But out of the Bad Boy, it had all the elements of hip hop that,
That's right.
Obviously, if it wasn't for Bad Boy, you wouldn't have the Notorious B.I.G. And Notorious B.I.G. is arguably, in a lot of people's, certainly top 5, top 3s, and a lot of people's the greatest to ever do it.
Biggie definitely heavy. Yeah. I mean, and he might only had 2 albums, but they were quality albums. Like,
I mean, he was certainly the GOAT, if you like. And
I thought Mace was alright as well when he come out with the Harlem World,
the Locks, G-Dep.
They were heavy.
You had a lot of people come through. Craig Mack, classics. But again, it caused a bit of a division that sort of continued on throughout. But in my opinion, I remember having a conversation, I don't want to sound like I'm name dropping here, but I done an interview with Clark Kent, and because he obviously produced some stuff for Biggie, but
you done an interview with Clark Kent?
Yeah. So, but I felt like, in some ways, the Bad Boy era could have saved hip hop, because it took it to a whole new audience, it took it to a whole new level, and all the elements that they used were still hip hop. It was just a different type of outlook. And okay, it was about champagne, but you can go and listen to hip hop tracks from 88, 87, and they're talking about gold rings and gold ropes and champagne, and you know what I mean? You look at Rapper's Delight, I've got a colour TV so I can see that I've got a swimming pool, I've got a
Yeah.
It always happened.
It's always been there.
Do you know what I mean? It's just that was a different element and a different outlook. And
people still had what I think it was like the skills always remained.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Now, it was still, the skills were still there with Bad Boy, most definitely. At that time.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was different when Biggie passed, and then Mace left them, and then the Locks left, and then he was really left with just Little Kim or someone, so. But we've got to give them props. And
I mean, it was just a different way, and okay, they made songs.
You needed them also because of the West Coast was, what they call it, taking over. Mm-hmm. So you needed something from the East to try to compete, at that time.
But also the way I like to see it is that the good thing about the division is that it probably brought out the best in the people like Mos Def, Talib Kweli, you know, Slum Village and all these, you know, and Tribe Called Quest was sort of riding that wave in between where they were a huge, commercially huge group, but obviously their albums kept true to the hip hop traditions.
Representing, weren't they?
Yeah.
You know, it was about represent your hood.
Yeah, but then they still made songs with Faith Evans. They still made songs with this person and that person. You know, the whole idea of, I mean, you know, no one liked to be accused of being a sellout, and that was the big thing, certainly during the 90s. Oh, this person sold out, that person sold out. But, you know, just by making popular music doesn't mean that you sold out.
Of course,
it just means that you're putting music to a different audience or a wider audience. So me, I'm a fan of Bad Boy. I'm a fan of a lot of the 2000s Def Jam stuff. I'm a fan of, you know, some of the stuff that people call shiny suit, because, you know, I think there's a place in everyone. You know, there's a place for everyone and everyone's taste.
Then again, actually, there was benefits for some other people when Bad Boy actually came out. Mm-hmm. I feel like, well, the people, if you were able to get round Biggie at that time, like Jay-Z, for example, him getting round Biggie, that helped him.
Yeah.
Really helped him on his first album that he come on, Brooklyn's Finest.
On
The Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah.
These things helped, you know, and then other people, like, you can use Biggie's name. That's what a lot of them seem to do.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, could use Tupac's name, for example.
I mean, Biggie he's quoted by Jay-Z, like, you know, someone sat and worked it out, and he's been quoted by Jay-Z. He's actually quoted Jay-Z and Biggie's lyrics like over 50 times or something like that, you know. But
the flossing side of things is interesting, though, because you can listen to Nas Illmatic, and it's not a flossing album at all, just pure lyrics, bars, everything. And he does It Was Written now, 96, his second album. Now, that is actually my favourite album.
Yeah.
That's what the funny. I have these debates about It Was Written was the best album, and people say no, it's Illmatic, it's more of a pure form. But what I'm listening to with It Was Written, he's got a tune on it like they gave you power. And he's rapping as if he's a gun, that creativity was just unbelievable. Then later, Tupac done a tune called Me and My Girlfriend, and talking about like it's his gun, and he actually got that idea off Nas.
Yeah.
So,
but the best sort of concept of that is Organised Confusion's Straight Bullet.
Yeah.
And I think I'm right in thinking that precedes both Nas.
Oh, going back before them.
Yeah,
okay, I'll have to check that
Straight
out.
Bullet is insane. And that is coming from the angle of what a Straight Bullet would do.
Yeah. And what era are we talking about?
I'm sure it's from the Extinction Agenda, so I think it is 94.
94, yeah.
I think it's 94, which would be before Nas's.
Right,
I think it was before Me and My Girlfriend was released.
Yeah.
So, check that one out.
And then also, I think, like, looking at the catalogue of albums now, and then when he dropped I Am, I thought that was a good album, the Nas I Am. Nostradamus, a bit half good, half I weren't really too into it. But that's still Matic when that dropped. That's what Jay-Z, he's coming at, isn't he? The Ether.
Yeah.
That album was like, because that was not long after that. I think the Twin Towers came down month or something before that. So I think that album was really needed, still Matic, because like people needed something positive, and you know, like you just that bit no hope at the time and that.
I mean, I think for Nas, after releasing Illmatic, it was never going to be easy, because even though, and I do find it interesting, I do like it when I do hear people saying that Illmatic isn't their favourite album, because and I bet you must have endless arguments with people over that,
all the time.
People just, you know, but, and you know, for me it's Illmatic, but again, like I was saying before, it could depend on how old you are. It could depend on a lot of things, and
that's true.
You know, and I have spoken to a few people who think other Nas's albums are better because
Lost Tapes, for example. Some people think that's the best album.
But as far as Nas, I mean, he's had to grow, and he's had to keep on, because everyone wants old Nas, but you can't make the album again and again and again.
I know.
So he's grown, and he's, you know, a lot of the music he's done, since then has been very commercial music. And then Nas is clever. Every album, he always has that Illmatic type of track. That he teases you in with.
Definitely.
And then on the album, you'll find different things.
What did you think when he done Hip Hop Is Dead? I mean, it wasn't the fact I was really into the whole album, but just the concept of hip hop is dead.
I think it's just one of those ones. It's a bit like, it's probably called a clickbait now. It's like, it's just to get your attention, isn't it?
Get your attention, yeah.
He's saying hip hop's dead, and then you go into it and you realise what he's saying.
And he breaks
it down. So, and he's still, I mean, the King's Disease albums he just brought out, two of them back to back. Just great albums.
Even the Damian Marley one he done. I thought that was a great collaboration. That one, Distant Relatives. And then I mean, look at other artists like AZ for example. Yeah. He is a very underrated artist. Yeah. From the Do or Die first album to Pieces of a Man, you could just go on forever with him. He just brought his Do or Die 2 out finally.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've not listened to it yet because I played one of his tracks on my radio show. From the first album, from the first.
I like their collaborations. He always did because his first feature AZ was on Nas's Illmatic, wasn't it? Life's a Beat and You Die. That one.
In fact, was that the only feature on that album, wasn't it?
It's the only feature, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Something must have been special about AZ.
Yeah. And Biggie only had one feature on his album, I think. Yeah. Method Man, didn't he? So.
And AZ got his name off the Paid in Full. There's one called AZ.
Right.
You know A.
Yeah.
On Paid in Full.
From the movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, the real AZ, that's where he got his name from. AZ.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, that was so New York. Around those mid-90s times. And I think, again, like you mentioned, the West Coast, I think because of the West Coast influence, New York had the point to prove. You know what I mean? So they had to come with a different way. They had to come on a different angle. And, it brought out people like Nas and stuff like that. So it's
and the Fame album at the time, that was might have been considered as commercial. But that was a real good album. Cormega was meant to be on it. Yeah. But then Nature replaced them.
Right.
Now, do you ever listen to Cormega?
I've listened to Cormega, but I've never been like a hardcore, like sort of fan music wise.
He's a very underrated artist. I mean, going back, like he was around even like he didn't have a deal till very late in that, but he used to always be emceeing. He was known in the streets as always. He was one of the best at the time. Yeah. I mean, but when he came and done the album called The Realness and The True Meaning. Independent, True Meaning won. That was actually the best independent of the year. He actually got an award,
right?
Because he knew how to market himself as being independent. Because it's not an easy job being an independent,
especially
artist.
Back then.
So also, what about people like Big L?
Big L again, Harlem's finest. Again, he passed away far too soon. Yeah. Well, we obviously murdered.
Last album was. Was it Platinum Plus? No, that was the track with Big Daddy Kane.
Yeah.
Platinum Plus.
The album was called The Big Picture.
The Big Picture, that's it, yeah. Great album, that.
Yeah, that was on Raucous Records. And obviously, his first album, I was only playing again on the radio show. I played a track, I think it's called All Black, on the lifestyles of the rich and dangerous. But again, this is at a time when, questions were being asked in New York. People were asking questions of New York. Following the success from NWA to Ice Cube, obviously Tupac representing the West Coast,
Wu-Tang,
Death Row Records were strong, Snoop Dogg. So people were asking questions of New York, you know what I mean? And I think that and you mentioned Wu-Tang came, Big L came, obviously Biggie, Nas, the whole Bad Boy thing. So It's that thing about competition definitely brings out the best, and I think the competition of the West Coast definitely brought out the best in East Coast hip hop.
That's how it just seems it was able to rise. Because competition can be good if something great can come out of it.
100%.
Rather than any beef or whatever they have in that. Also, as well, and as we're exploring into New York and that, Mobb Deep, for example, their first album, Juvenile Hell, didn't really, maybe only sold 20,000 copies or something like that. Right. But when he done The Infamous, he said, we were ready then. Yeah. And he could see the difference when he was working with Nas, Wu-Tang Clan. Yeah. And then the producers, Havoc was making a lot of the beats, weren't he also?
Yeah, Havoc was making beats, and I only, again, sort of, I know we get a bit of a gasp when I say this, but I'm not the biggest Mobb Deep fan.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know what it is, but it's just one of those. I mean, obviously I know, and I do play.
It was the Shook ones that stood out.
So I know Mobb Deep and know Mobb Deep tracks, but I was never really a listener. Because I've been doing a little bit of backtrack research, and then I realised one of the tracks on the album that Q-Tip produced.
And
Q-Tip's on it.
That's it. He's on it.
And I was like, whoa, so it's good now. Like the name of this podcast, I'm discovering new stuff. I'm going back and discovering
we have to,
stuff that I might have missed the first time around. And sometimes there's albums that come out, Mobb Deep's one, and I think, what was I listening to at the time? And I'll go back and look at that year and I think, okay, I missed that because I was listening to that.
They were very consistent in the beginning, Mobb Deep.
Yeah.
Like, they might have been one of the most consistent groups.
Yeah.
Until obviously, well, they signed with 50 and then that was a bit different. But for many, many years, they were quite consistent in what they were doing. You knew what you were getting with Mobb Deep.
Well, yeah.
Most of the time. And then he did a solo, the one who passed away, Prodigy.
Yeah.
Called the HNIC.
That's
that
right.
was real heavy album, that.
Okay, yeah.
And that was like, because no one knew him as a soloist.
No.
So it kind of elevated him up there. He was trying to go out now, Jay-Z. He was like, I'm mixing with the big boys now.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
obviously they had that thing with Tupac themselves, didn't he?
Yeah, they did. Well, Mobb Deep were one of the ones really going at Tupac.
Hit Him Up was like, was aimed at both.
That was
aimed at Biggie and
it was it was going at Mobb Deep, but he more was concentrating on Prodigy.
Yeah.
He mentioned about Sickle Cell and that. Yeah,
like
he was, because Prodigy's the one who had the mouth and he was constantly, Havoc was a bit more quiet to speak when needed to. Yeah, but that era though was just, that was unbelievable. And like the CNN, like Noriega, Capone, Tragic Gaddafi, you know, these are all people who these are solid lyricists though, you know, and you don't produce these no more though. That's the problem.
I think, I mean, but you can't repeat history sometimes.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
so you know, you have to look now, and obviously the landscape changes. But like I say, going right through, you know, I think Mos Def in '99 with Black on Both Sides, that was a true representation. I mean, of New York at the time. I mean, he had tracks on there. The track I love on there. Well, I love the whole album. I'll be honest with you. But Brooklyn, which is sort of in two parts. You know, we really sort of paint a picture of what it's like to be brought up in Brooklyn, and his, you know, what his memories of Brooklyn is, and as to what it's like now. And then obviously Jay-Z throughout his whole career has always, you know, represented not just Brooklyn, but in particular Marcy, where he grew up.
Yeah.
And he's been one of the biggest advocates of New York that if they've ever had. He's got a stamp on him, you know. So, I think, as I said before, the landscape changes, and there is still incredible music that's coming out now. It's just that you have to look a little bit deeper for it.
Where'd you rate Big Pun?
Big Pun.
He's with the Terror Squad.
Yeah. I mean, again, Big Pun is probably one of those artists which, again, people are, what? I don't. But I used to check. See, as a DJ, there were certain artists, hip-hop artists, as a DJ, that I would be looking for to see what music of theirs I could play in the club. So I mightn't necessarily be checking out the albums. So certain Mobb Deep tracks, a lot of Mobb Deep tracks would work in the club. So I check them singles out. Big Pun, same. Jay-Z, I never used to really sit and listen to Jay-Z albums. And Big Pun's album is one of the albums, because his first two albums.
Capital Punishment, the first one. The second one, Yeah Baby, or something. Yeah.
And so I can't really comment too much on them as albums.
Yeah.
But I know, as far as his body of work with regards to the singles he brought out and the collaboration stuff he done with like Beatnuts and Fat Joe, and just listening to him. A good friend of mine, Tony, he's actually got me listening to Big Pun again, because I was in his car and he was like, I can't believe you never told me about this. And he put on Deep Cover, Twins with Fat Joe.
Yeah, that's even Fat Joe steps up on that.
Oh man,
I don't know Pumrit's lyric for them, but they're both on point on that.
In fact, I'm not sure when this is going out, but I'm having a clash on Sunday and I'm going to play Deep Cover Twins.
That's a heavy. It is, you know, and
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think what Snoop trade onto it, but
I'm not a big Fat Joe fan, but now and again he can step up.
Yeah.
His first album, Fat Joe, Don Cartagena.
Yeah.
And the track on there where he's got John Blaze, where he's got Raekwon on it.
I think.
Nas, he's got Jadakiss on it.
But I think
and Fat Joe.
With Fat Joe though,
yeah,
what a lot of people who listen to, even fans of Fat Joe now, what some of them won't realise is that he goes back to early KRS-One, Diamond D, DITC. Fat Joe was a graffiti artist. He came up through. He was one of the pioneer OGs, originator. This stuff that you see now with the shades and this Hawaiian shirts and stuff, and the money and the champagne and the cars, he's kept that up now. But he's come from the real, original hip hop sort of community.
Yeah.
So I think, although people might see him as a bit of a commercial artist now, I think people need to respect where Fat Joe's come from, because if you listen to KRS-One's Out for Fame, which is all about graffiti.
I was just going to mention KRS-One.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about KRS-One.
Definitely.
Yeah. Again, from the Bronx.
Mm.
So do your homework on Fat Joe, because he's a legend. But yeah, let's talk
KRS-One. KRS-One. Now, someone actually messaged me yesterday, said, did I see the battle with KRS-One and Big Daddy Kane when they do the verses?
Wow.
I have not. Have you watched it?
I watched it. I watched it day before yesterday.
Okay, you give me a little insight. I'm going to watch it later. But
right, okay. I am KRS-One fan. I'm a Big Daddy Kane fan.
Yeah.
I'm a huge KRS-One. I'm a huge fan of both. Don't get me wrong. If I was to rate them as a fan, I'd put KRS just over Big Daddy Kane.
Okay.
That said, for the versus battle, I don't know why, but KRS sort of approached it like it was a live show. And that KRS's show, I've been lucky enough to watch KRS live a few times. I've seen Big Daddy Kane as well, but I've seen KRS more times than Kane. I was lucky enough to meet him and have a conversation with him. But with his live shows, there's full of energy and there's a bit of call and response with the crowd.
KRS-One.
KRS,
okay.
Yeah. Now, we done that in the Barclays Centre for this versus, and it didn't really come off as well. Whereas Big Daddy Kane, his performance was a lot slicker, a lot more clear, and his performance was better than KRS.
He's got a sick style, Kane, though, when he wants
Kane's
to,
just, like I say, once I seen that advertised, I was like so excited, and I don't really do the verses thing. I don't really do them, not for any particular reason. I just don't get round to seeing them, and I've heard some good stuff about them, and some of them I've watched and I thought, well, okay, it's just people going through their catalogue. But this one was done in the Barclays Centre. It was full of hip hop fans. They brought people like KRS, Big Daddy Kane brought Nice and Smooth on stage. KRS brought Daz FX on stage and Mad Lion on stage. And at the end of the day, they hugged, and it was like there's no beef in this whatsoever. It was all love, so that was good to see. But I think as far as
did you feel like got
Kane won it as a performance.
As a performance,
you know what I mean? I wouldn't say around now and say, now Kane's my favourite MC, because KRS for me.
It is the approach like you've just said, because I remember KRS-One was talking about battle raps, and he was saying that in front of a live audience, sometimes you might win the crowd over at the time, and also when you play the tape back, you might think the other artist was more poetic. Because the live is completely different. Than putting on that tape, you must know definitely that yourself.
And like I say, perform. I think just based on the performance. Do you know what I mean? But for me, going back to what we were originally talking about with regard to New York, and obviously hip hop coming from the Bronx, the KRS-One influence in all this with his battles with MC Shan. Him being from the Bronx, living in a homeless shelter, and the guy who worked in the homeless shelter, So the guy who worked in the homeless shelter turned out to be Scott LaRock, who was a DJ.
Wow.
Who then sort of took KRS under his wing and was like, okay, I'm a DJ. I'm not only am I a community sort of social worker, but I'm also a DJ. Check these beats out, and then KRS linked with him, and then they became Boogie Down Productions, with D Nice and Melody and all them people as well. So. That story is an amazing story, but he's come through from the Bronx with the originators, and then obviously their battle with the Juice Crew is legendary.
Definitely legendary.
That's what spawned The Bridges Over and stuff like that. And
powerful.
Criminal Minded album was just an absolute classic. And then obviously, unfortunately, Scott LaRock gets killed, gets shot.
Yeah.
And then they come out with My Philosophy, which is another Boogie Down Productions.
A lot of good artists there we lost. DMX, for example, that was a sad loss. He was one incredible artist, very consistent with his albums, I don't think no one's ever just come out like that. No,
and his impact, so many people. DMX is one of those artists whereby there's people who weren't particularly interested in hip-hop until they heard DMX.
Good actor also.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Naturalist.
Yeah.
Such a
but
naturalist.
like I say, so people would be like, I wasn't really into it. I was into rock or indie or whatever, and then I heard DMX. Because he appealed to that kind of sort of rock kind of crowd and that rock, sort of genre. Yeah. Well, you know what? We're coming near to the end of the show. That went too quick. That went too quick. But you know what? We will do a follow-up soon. We will. You know, because it's important. We've had you on before on season 2, and we got you on again. But we're going to have to...
we're gonna come with something like maybe even we could have a little music in the background soon. Anyway,
Yeah, man, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. You know, we can maybe do like an artist focus. So maybe, you know, we can just break down 3 different artists because we like I say, it took us 20 minutes. Next minute we mentioned KRS One. It's like, oh.
It is. Yeah. I mean, like, but definitely we've got more to come, and it's more for the people to wait and see anyway. And usually, you know what we do? It's always the importance of our history, which we always cover, which is so important because we're coming near the end. But it's just recognize the importance of our history, including hip hop music, anything what we've done in our history. So, you know, I want to thank you very much, DJ Toucan.
No problem, man.
And we will do this again, part 3. Coming soon. Who knows what we'll pick up there.
Nice.
But I want to thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You know, this is James Diboe, season 3, and we're out of here today anyway. But thank you very much, DJ Toucan.
Peace.
We'll do this again.